Hello and welcome to Parenting SOS. Happy Mum, Happy Baby is all about having the conversations that really matter when it comes to being a parent. The highs, the lows and every muddy, messy thing in between. But we also know that seeking support and advice around parenting isn't always easy. And that's where Parenting SOS comes in. And today we're exploring a topic that is close to my heart. Raising boys. Now, every child is an individual, and whether you're a parent to boys or girls, from the moment the sex of your baby is revealed, the gender stereotyping begins. Joining me today is Kirstie Beaven, the founder and editor of Sonshine magazine, which is dedicated to the subject of raising boys for a more equal world. Kirstie says the world is full of things that teach us gender stereotypes. Some of them we don't even realise. For example, when someone is pregnant, we often ask, "Do you know what you're having?" and then have a reaction to it. Someone who has two sons, this was me, and is having a third boy might be told, "Oh, that's a shame." Why? Why is this? What are we saying? From the toys we buy to the clothes our children wear. There's so much to get into on this topic and I cannot wait. Kirstie, welcome to Parenting SOS.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I mean, this is a topic that you have really, you had a girl, then you had your son, then this you just found yourself in an area that you felt no one was talking about raising boys in the way that you were experiencing it.
Yeah, I think that was basically when I had my daughter, I felt really confident about it.
Yeah.
And not because it's easier, but because I felt like there were lots of things that when I was growing up, I thought, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. I'm going to make sure my daughter doesn't have this. You know, well, we grew up with a lot of diet culture and all these things that as a woman you've lived through.
Yeah.
And so I felt like I was well supported with raising my daughter to break down those stereotypes. And I felt like when I had questions, there were places on the internet that I could find some advice. And then my son came along 2 years later and I sort of realised that gender stereotypes were affecting him in a way that I wasn't tuned into and I had basically never thought about. And I looked for resources and I didn't find any. I didn't find things that would help me raise a kind, sensitive boy. My daughter was very forthright and she's not afraid to tell you what she wants. And my son wasn't like that when he was small, though he has learnt from her, learnt from the best. But he was a more malleable personality. And I just felt like, I'm not seeing how I'm supposed to break down these stereotypes for him.
Yeah. Also, 8 years ago, it's really interesting because around that time, there would have been a lot of the future is female. There was a lot of that chat. And I can remember at the time kind of going, this is amazing. It's amazing to empower women and girls and let them know that, yes, they can be whatever they want to be. But then all of a sudden, it felt like the boys were kind of pushed out of the picture in terms of those conversations.
Yeah, and it is, if you're only talking to the girls about how we've got to change the world, you're only going to get half a change. That's what I was feeling like. We have to change the way we're talking to and about our girls. Yeah. And I'm so glad we're doing that. It's so necessary. But we have to also change how we're talking to and about our boys. Yeah. Change the way that they're experiencing the world and give them the same range of options. There's so much similarity between humans. And if you look at where our natural interests lie, that's our personalities. It's not to do with our gender. My favourite thing to do with the children is build the train set. I love the train set. And I loved the train set when I was a kid, but we didn't buy a train set till my brother was born.
Right.
So I if I hadn't had a brother, maybe I'd never have known that the train set's my favourite thing. Yeah. I happened to be given the opportunity to find that out. And it was nothing to do with, I also really love trains. It's nothing to do with my gender.
It's funny, I can remember either the first or second series, actually, of the podcast, we did an episode that was on gendered toys. And a woman from Let Toys Be Toys came on. And it's really interesting because once you realise that things are pink for girls, blue for boys, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the thing, that's it. Once I'd sort of tugged at the little thread, the hanging thread, then everything starts to unravel and you think, oh no, I hadn't noticed this in the toys, in the books, on TV, literally everywhere. You just suddenly start to see the stereotypes are there for girls and for boys. Like it's not just that we stereotype the girls, which does happen, is that we also are stereotyping the boys.
And I think it works both ways, isn't it? For instance, when my now 8-year-old, when he was about 3, he loved this sink. It was a kitchen sink. It came with like plastic plates and knives and forks and stuff, and he'd sit there and he'd literally wash up and play in it for ages. And then when it was his best friend, who was a girl, it's still his best friend, it was her birthday, and I bought her a sink. I then had to caveat it to the parents, just so you know, this is Buddy's favourite toy. I've not just bought your daughter a sink. Do you know what I mean? Because then you're just like, ah!
I know. I mean, it feels like a minefield as well. And I think that's one of the things that I've been... Part of the reason I wanted to make a resource for other parents is because I wanted people to talk to about it and say, exactly like that story, I think everyone should have access to the washing up.
Yeah.
If they like playing washing up, great, everyone should get to do it. And also everyone should learn to do it so that we all do our fair share of the washing up.
Yes.
I felt like I couldn't have those conversations with regard to... I felt a little bit uncomfortable to say. But actually, the thing that my son likes most at playgroup is the babies.
So at what point did you think about creating Sonshine?
He was about 2, I think. And what it mainly was is that he really wanted to be like his sister. And I think that's really common.
Yeah.
The elder sibling has such a huge power over the younger ones and can be used for good and bad. But he just thought, and he probably still does, but he just thought she's the most amazing person I've ever seen in my life, and I want to be just like her. And I actually felt like I had to unpick some of my own biases around that. Like, why was it challenging for me that he wanted to play with the same toys as her, or that he wanted to wear her clothes, or grow his hair long, all of these things, which I know are fine. They are fine. That is fine. But actually, deep within me, I felt a bit uncomfortable every time we went on the bus and somebody said, "How old's your little girl?" But I really wanted to be able to have these conversations. And I felt like you say, it was at a time when we were talking about Me Too, and it felt really important, not just for him as a sensitive soul who people thought was a girl, not just for him, but also for his sister, because more than 40% of girls in a mixed-sex secondary school will say that they have been sexually harassed at school. So they've had some incident of sexual harassment in school time, on school grounds. And I just thought, that is not a problem for our girls. That is a problem for our boys.
Absolutely.
That is a problem that we as parents need to be aware of and be thinking, how do we fix that? And the only way we fix that is by talking to our sons.
Yeah. Obviously, especially for teenage boys at the moment, there's a lot of stuff online that I think we all worry about. I worry about boys' mental health. I think because of what we've said, about this whole the future is female thing, I think it has left some kids feeling a little bit out of the loop. We know that mental health is bad across the board, but for teenage boys with suicide rates and stuff, it's particularly bad. What can we as mums do now to nurture our kids, all children, especially boys, because this is about raising boys, so that they are equipped for a future that does include them in every single way?
I think it just takes a little bit of thought, because a lot of this stuff is ingrained in the way we interact with our kids. So some studies have shown that when parents read to their children, they're more likely to use emotional language when they're talking to their daughters, reading with their daughters, than they are with their sons. So, if you're reading Rabbit's Nap, one of my favourites.
Yeah, I love that one. Yeah. Especially for the lift the flap one.
Yeah.
Love it,
yeah. And why is Rabbit sad? Rabbit wants to have a nap and can't find a place to have a nap. You might use emotional language there, pulling out the emotions, rather than saying, how many socks can you see in the chest? And so studies have shown that we're just more likely to do that with daughters and sons. So making a sort of mental note to ourselves to do that with all our children, to give them names for emotions so that then they are able to name them in themselves. Like you said, the mental health crisis is big for boys. That boys aged 15 to 19 are twice as likely to die by suicide than girls. And Childline report that 70% of their calls where they know whether it is a male or female caller. 70% roughly is from girls.
Really?
Yeah,
so they're reaching out and talking and seeking that help, whereas boys won't.
Yeah.
Which is,
Yeah, exactly. So boys are being told they've got to be strong, being told that showing their emotions is weakness. That boys don't cry thing. We might not be saying that to our kids, but are we acting it out?
Yeah.
Like, can you make space for your boys to feel sad and to say, it's okay for you to feel sad and it's okay for you to tell me when you feel sad, when you feel lonely, when you feel upset about how your friends treated you in the playground. But I think it's about keeping lines of communication open and showing your kids that you care about their feelings, that you want to hear about it, even when it comes out as anger, even when it comes out as frustration, that is very challenging. But I hear what you're saying.
Anger and frustration I find really interesting because I know that they were definitely emotions that me and my siblings and children of my age, actually, I won't just put this on my mum and dad, I think it was our generation, weren't allowed to express. We were not allowed to express that. Therefore, when my kids display that behaviour, I can feel it within me. I can feel like my lizard is just going, oh, I'm so fizzy, because I just don't know how to. I know what that feeling is. I've always had to suppress it. Whereas now they're expressing it. I'm glad that it's coming out. But at the same time, like, I don't know how to not put the lid back on it because you've got to be able to express it, but how to help you through it.
Yeah, I agree. I find that very difficult because I totally agree with you. I had exactly the same. It would not have been okay to have a big outburst of anger. Absolutely not. And I don't like it when my kids do it.
I don't think anyone does. Oh, there he
horrible.
goes again. There she is throwing. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
you just carry on, Emily.
off.
It's fine.
No, I mean, and it is hard, isn't it? Because I feel like the other thing is that for boys, that tends to be where all emotion gets channeled.
Yeah.
So they've done some studies where they've asked kids to write down the names for emotions, and girls can write down more emotions than boys can.
Right.
They've got more words for it, except anger, frustration, all of that sort of stuff. That is where boys' emotional outlet is channeled. Mm-hmm. So that is really complicated, I think, because if you watch TV programs, like, you'll often see, someone gets angry and they knock everything off a table. Or that's one of my things. I'd quite like to knock everything off the table. God, yeah, can you imagine?
I'd quite like to set up a table just so I can do that.
Yeah, or turn it over.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Perhaps we should just do that. Everybody should be allowed to go out.
Should we just set up like an anger group so we could just swipe tables and then flip them? That's what we're doing tonight.
That's what we'll need. But that's the thing that, how often have you seen a woman on TV do that?
Yeah.
You never see that. You never see a girl. You definitely never see a little girl in a TV program or a female character in like a cartoon. They never do that. And that, I think that is something that we know that stuff's got to come out somewhere.
Yeah.
But also it's talking to our kids, isn't it, about when is it safe to express your anger and how can you express it in a safe way? Like, not in a way that smashes the place up or worse is violence, comes out as violence against another person.
Yeah.
And that is, when you look at the domestic violence, domestic abuse statistics, these anger and frustration that are coming out, when the football's on, that domestic abuse goes up. It is shocking to see. This stuff might seem small when they're small, but it can get big and horrible and awful. And we have to find ways to change this for our boys.
Times are, people are talking in a very different way.
Yeah.
And if we can filter that into our kids when they're younger, they don't have to go through so much of the stuff that we have. They can grow up confident and aware and just much more in touch with their own feelings and those of others. I love what you said about toys as well, actually. Because what we did is I realised that when we went over to other people's houses, what toys the boys were gravitating towards. And a lot of time, one of them would instantly go to dolls, the kitchen, the pram. So we just thought, well, let's get him one. And it's just been so fascinating to see that play and to get rid of this is for girls, this is for boys. I hate any sort of weapon. I think my husband's view on it is very different to mine. If it's a lightsaber or if it's a sword because you've been to, one of the castles or whatever. I just think give a boy a lightsaber, give a child a lightsaber, they will whack someone with it. They just will. Yeah. It's,
Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you?
why wouldn't you? Come on. So I feel like when there are toys that are more about nurturing and just about play, whether that's a baby or a doll or a Barbie or even their action figures, really, the things that they can actually role play with is very different to that get up and let's whack each other with our lightsabers.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, also role play is so important. Like kids having access to the doll's house. The doll's house is a place where you can play out all the things that happen to you. Yeah. You can be in control of it. You can be mum, you can be dad, you can be the baby. Like you can be all the different roles in that. And if you don't have the option to do that, if you're closing that off to the boys, because only the girls get a doll's house, that you're closing off the opportunity to work through something because play is their work, right? And play is how they're going to work through these things and find out about the world and explore things. And what's the worst thing that could happen? Like they grow up to be a caring dad. they end up.
What have we done?
Yeah, oh no! My son has turned out to be a very
nice
loving.
Human.
Yeah.
Oh gosh!
What a failure on my part.
On Parenting SOS, we ask you to come in with your top 3 questions, and the first one is actually clothes based. So, why are boys' clothes so boring? The colours are dull, and there are other differences in the aisle about what is on them. So, why going more into that and what is now on our kids' clothing? Talk to me about that.
Well, this is one of the things that I noticed really early on. And this is one of those things that once you see it, you can't unsee it. But basically, the animals that show up on clothes for boys and clothes for girls are completely different.
On my notes upstairs, by the way, before you say this, on my notes upstairs, I've literally highlighted it and put mind blown next to it. I'm 10 years into this. My mind is blown by the way that you're going to describe the animals for boys and girls.
Okay, so for boys, the top animals that you're likely to find are sharks, the T-Rex and wolves. Mm-hmm. And for girls, it's rabbits and llamas and then sort of little animals like guinea pigs. And the key thing about these is that what you'll see on boys' clothes is predators and what you see on girls' clothes is prey.
That is just like literally, once you've said that, I'm just, There's no rabbits on my kids' clothes.
No. It's really hard. I mean, my son loves rabbits. It's really hard to find a rabbit on a standard T-shirt.
I imagine Bowden do some nice. Bowden or Jules will do nice rabbits for boys.
Yes, they do. I mean, just nice animal, sweet animals. They also do some very good guinea pigs. Another favourite in our house. But
and Frugy.
Yeah, that's it. So it's not that they don't exist. It's that if you go into any high street shop.
And accessible clothing, actually, because we've just said 2 brands that are a little bit more expensive. Mm-hmm. So whereas if you're going into a supermarket and getting your things from George or F&F or anything like that. Then...
Which have got very lovely designs, but you will find that division is really clear. And it's not just that they're predators and prey. Obviously, little kids don't know that. They don't know anything about that, but it's the way that they're depicted. So you'll see that animals on boys' clothes tend to have teeth out, often have claws. I mean, we once got given a dinosaur T-shirt that was so terrifying that my son literally hid it in the back of the cupboard. He was like, I'm not going anywhere near that. It was so frightening. So they are frightening images. Like they're fierce, they're wild, and literally they're wild animals. Whereas the things that you'll see in the girls section tend to be domesticated, so like pets. They tend to be depicted as cute. They're often like sitting around.
Yeah.
They've got their eyes shut. They're smiling, or nearly always smiling. And so it's not just what the kids see by that. So when you buy them that, it's not just that they see they're wearing something fierce or something cute. It's how the adults treat them. When, like, how differently are you going to treat a kid without meaning to? Like, none of this stuff is our fault. Like, we have associations. So without meaning to, if you see a kid wearing a big, fierce T-Rex, all teeth and claws, and you see a kid wearing a rabbit wearing a straw hat with florals on it, you're going to treat them differently. You're going to just, something in you is going to make a set of assumptions about them, regardless of their gender, actually, by that thing. And I think that once I saw that, I thought, I don't like this. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see my son as fierce and wild and dangerous, even though sometimes he might be fierce and wild and dangerous. And I don't want my daughter to only get the option of
cute and fluffy.
Cute and fluffy. She is not a naturally cute and fluffy person for a significant proportion of the time. That's not her personality.
Yeah.
The other thing that I've noticed in kids' clothes is like the boys' clothes, that question that you had about why are they so dull? So that when you were talking about the expressive, like wanting to be able to express yourself through your clothes. So, you walk into the supermarket or high street shops or wherever, and it's nearly always divided. And the girls' section is like pink, but you also get loads of other colours. Mm-hmm. And the boys' section is nearly always what I call sludge. You get navy, you get khakis, you get maybe a burgundy.
Yeah.
Let's go wild.
And then white and black.
Yeah. And also there's no reason for that. I think boys' clothes are often more practical.
Yeah.
So they tend to be cut a bit bigger. So if you take a T-shirt from the boys' section and you get the same size in the girls' section, you'll find that the girls might be tighter, cut shorter.
Almost like they're almost giving them fitted clothes at such a young age.
Yeah.
I love a post that you actually wrote about it, about a girl's T-shirt. Okay, so let's make it shorter, and then let's add a frill around the bottom, a frill around the arms, a frill around the neck, a frill around the sides. Why not?
Yeah, just frills everywhere. Just want it really tight and short and frilly.
Yeah. I find it fascinating as well what you've said about remembering it's an industry. And if you have girls' clothes and boys' clothes, you aren't handing your girl's clothes down to your boy, or your boy. Well, you're more likely to hand your boy clothes down to your girl, but that's not happening as much. So basically, if you've got one of each, you're literally spending double the money.
That's it. Divide the market, and then you get 2 bites of the cherry, right? You get to sell it twice. So that's the only reason to do it. There's no reason, because you could just have it all together and choose whatever would interest your kid. And all of the things that we've mentioned could interest any kid, in my mind.
Yeah.
The other thing that I notice about it is the safety aspect. So for swimwear, for coats, for all of these things, wear a bright colour keeps your kids safe. Mm-hmm. Like, wouldn't it be better for all swimwear to be in bright neons, pinks, orange, yellow?
I saw the thing that you did about swimmer, actually, and about how if they're in sort of murky, what can you see your child in? If they're in the swim pool and they're in danger, maybe they've gone under, what can you see them in?
Yeah.
And it's neon.
It's neons, and it's pinks and oranges. And yet, if you go and look at the swimwear for boys, it is nearly always blue. Mm-hmm. And that is the hardest thing to see. It's really hard to see in a blue pool, especially if the water is like choppy on the top.
Yeah.
And if you are in open water, so not in a pool, I mean, visibility is bad, but neon is what shows up.
Yeah.
So obviously there's nothing safer than your eyes on your kid, right? But wouldn't it be better if we just gave the option for all of the swimwear to be in bright colours?
Yeah. And that's it, isn't it? It's the option. Mm-hmm. Because at the moment, there isn't an option.
Yeah. And boys, the other thing is that it cuts both ways, these things. So girls' swimsuits are often like women's swimsuits. And that's not necessarily very sun safe. So you go into the girls' section and you'll see, little vest tops, maybe a bikini. And in the boys' section, you'll see a full suit, comes down to the arms, comes down to the knees. And that is so much more recognised for boys, sun safe, yes, than it is for girls. So there's all these things, like all kids should have the option to be seen in the water. All kids should have the option to be sun safe.
Yeah.
And then coats, all kids should have a winter coat that means they can be seen in the dark. I mean, I just think it's madness that boys could only wear a navy or black coat. I
mean, having 3 kids, what I've realised is that I need them all to wear a colour when we're out, so I know where they are. Yeah. Otherwise, I just... Yeah, not that I know where they are, but it's very easy to kind of go 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, you need to spot them. Yeah, I totally agree.
Your next question is actually about other people, so whether that's any adults, basically. What to say to other adults who aren't on board with the choices you're making about your parenting?
This is a tough one. So I think there are 2 ways that you can approach this, and it's whether those adults are... I mean, if it's in your family, often I think, particularly our own parents, if you are doing things differently to the way they did it, it can feel like a personal slight. Yeah. And so you want to be kind and gentle and say, this is not a judgment on you. Yeah. This is how I want to do it now for the society that my kids are growing up in now, for the time that they are today. So to say, I know we did things differently before, but now, for me, it's okay for my son to wear pink. It's often grandparents might feel a bit uncomfortable about that because it's something that they wouldn't have done. Yeah. And to say, times have changed and that's okay. We're parenting for who these kids are now. So partly to go kindly and gently and understand why they might then feel worried. Yeah. I think often grandparents can feel like, oh, I made a mistake because I didn't do that with you. But we can only do what we can do when we know what we know. And so now we know differently, we do differently. And so that's part of it.
And that would be the biggest mistake, right? If we knew and we didn't change it.
Yeah.
Back then they didn't know.
No, exactly. And we've got to give people grace for that, I think. So that's if you're in your family, there's obviously a bit of kindness and love and conversation that you've got to have around that. It's not a reflection on them. It's how you're going to do it for the time that you live in now. If it's in school and maybe, this thing about wanting to play with the girls' toys. Yes. So perhaps your son's come home and said, I wasn't allowed to play with the babies today, or I wanted to play with the babies, but someone said babies are just for girls. If you need to have a conversation with nursery or with school teachers, then I think also, because people often say to me, oh, how do you do it without being that parent? And I think, oh, I probably am that parent.
I just am.
Yeah,
I accept the role.
Just take it. Just be like, yes, that's who I'm going to be. But I think you can do it in a way that is respectful and kind. And to say, because people who work in schools and nurseries and childminders, they're there looking after our children. They love them. They are caring for them. And they want the best for our kids, for certain. Yeah. That's their jobs. They do that job because they love being with those children. So say that. I know that you are always working to do the best for my kid. And I wanted to talk to you about gender, stereotypes, whatever you think will resonate with them. And say, this thing happened, but use those words that we were saying earlier just to say, what's the worst that can happen if the boys play with the babies? They might, there's nothing bad that can come out of that. It's good for all of them. I think most people now who work in early years were totally on board with that.
Well, final of your 3 questions is, what should I do if my son wants to dress girly, wear skirts or pink or sparkles? And this normally happens when they're at nursery age, you're saying.
Yeah, so that my son definitely did this. Yeah. So he really wanted to wear skirts. And like we talked about, that is something that I had to deal with. Yeah. Why did it make me feel uncomfortable? Because skirts are really fun. Yeah.
Especially when there's big films like Frozen or Moana. watch Frozen. Oh, you can be Kristoff. Well, I don't want to be Kristoff, do I? I want to be Anna because she's more fun. She's got the personality.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, I don't want to be the snowman.
Elsa, she makes it.
Yeah. Please don't make me be Olaf. I don't like him.
But it's that thing, isn't it? When there are massive cultural moments that happen and big things that happen within pop culture and stuff, and then you're going, no, but you can't be that person.
Yeah,
you can't. You can dress up as Doctor Who or dress up as something that don't do an Elsa or an Anna.
Yeah, it seems weird as well, because if your daughter said, I want to be Doctor Who, we'd be like, yeah, sure.
You wouldn't even think twice about it.
You wouldn't even think twice about it.
And that's before Jodie Whittaker as well. You just would not think twice about it.
Yes, it would be totally fine for a girl to go to World Book Day as a male character from a book. That is totally fine. But if your son says, I want to go as Elsa, or I want to go as Matilda.
Yeah.
You know, I really identify with this amazing character. Do you feel comfortable about that, sending your kid into school dressed as Matilda? I mean, I get it. So basically, when my son did it, I think there are two ways to approach it, because for me, it wasn't so challenging. You know, it was personally challenging. But the area that we live in, like we live in East London, when we walk down the street, because wearing a skirt culturally, men wear skirts or dresses or tunic style items of clothing all around the world. It just so happens not so much here. So, you know, when my son's wearing a skirt, although he doesn't anymore, and that's a whole other thing, but when my son was wearing a skirt, you know, we would walk down the high street, and maybe it's a Friday, there's a man going to mosque and he's wearing his kurta and that, you know, a long tunic. Yeah. Well, that's a skirt. Or perhaps we walk past a shop with some African suits in, and they've got a long, beautiful, pink, stylish top that comes down to mid-thigh. Well, that looks a bit like a dress, right? I mean, also where we live, people are wearing all sorts of things. So sometimes you walk down the street and someone's wearing like a leather kilt. So, you know that we're in an area where actually dressing can be very expressive, but it can also represent your culture, and skirts are less gendered. Yeah. You know, that just becomes less of a thing. But I think if you're feeling anxious about it, you can prepare your kid. And that I think, you know, we've talked about this a lot in the magazine, because it's a concern for people. Will my kid get bullied?
It's that, isn't it? Because I like to think that my kids can wear whatever they want at home. I always say that my son, my eldest, goes to the park. He always looks like a Victorian child with like a top hat, and you know, he absolutely does not care. Yeah, and I absolutely love that. But before, he used to go to non-uniform day to school. I almost like you have to prepare them in a way and protect them.
Yeah, I think, and that's what we all want to do. We all want to protect our children, and we don't want them to come home with their costumes stuffed in their bag, sad. And I know that that's happened. People have written to me and told me that this is what's happened. They've worn their favourite sparkly jacket and then come home, I never want to wear it again. Like the thing, I never want to wear pink again, right? Yeah. So, yeah, you can prepare them. And I think one of these things is giving them the words to say. For example, with the World Book Day, I'm going as this character. Some people are going to be surprised that you came as a girl. I think it's brilliant. So validate them. Yeah. I think this is brilliant. I know why you've chosen this. It really suits you. You look great. You should be really confident. If someone says something to you about only girls can dress up as girls, just say, I don't agree with you. Just say that. So give them the words, actual words. You can say, I don't agree with you. Yeah. I love this character and I think I look great. And I think it's nice to say, some people don't know yet that it's okay to dress up as whoever you like. Yeah. And use the word yet, not like a judgment on that person, but they don't know that yet. And they'll learn it. You can dress up as whoever you like. And I think that set of words can come out at lots of different times. So if it's like only girls can wear sequins, only girls can have sparkles, anyone can have sparkles, sparkles are cool, say that to them. You can say sparkles are cool. you would probably like sparkles too. I think the other thing I would say is that often we're really worried about it when they're very small.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're very small, most kids don't say that.
Yeah.
So if you send them to nursery and they're wearing a skirt, I have done that. Nobody said anything.
Yeah.
Nobody batted an eyelid. They hadn't worked out what they didn't have this strong feeling about what's for boys and what's for girls yet. It's when you get to school, I think, it's like 5, where they start to be a bit clearer about that. This is for boys, this is for girls. And it's because they're trying to find out how they fit into social groups. And that is when they're old enough, I think, for you to say, I believe in you.
Yeah.
And you're allowed to believe in yourself. And you're allowed to say to the other kids, I don't agree with you.
Yeah. It reminds me of an amazing book that I read called What Wesley Wore. I feel like Wesley is a weasel.
I think I've read that book. I think he is a weasel.
Yeah. And basically he just dresses however he dresses and everyone else is like, Wesley, you can't wear that stuff. And then a band come into town and they take Wesley off because he looks so cool. And then when he comes back, everyone's dressing like Wesley.
I love it.
It's such a good book. It's about being who you are and expressing yourself in a way that feels right for you.
Yeah, exactly. And to give... there's so much joy in feeling like you look great and letting kids have that and empowering them to have that conversation. The other thing is, of course, you can always talk to school.
Yeah.
If you're really worried about it, just have a word with the teacher and say, my son wants to come in wearing something which might not fit in. Can you keep an eye on that?
Yeah.
And I think most teachers will be really like, of course.
Yeah.
Of course we will be empowering him with those words as well.
The other thing that we do on Parenting SOS is we ask our community to send in some questions. Let me put my tongue back in. So we've got 3 questions from our community. So the first one is, I'm worried about the social pressures of gender stereotyping from other children at school influencing my son negatively. What can I do to support him? So this goes beyond the clothes. It's in that language that's out there about, having to be a certain way.
I think that this is a worry that we all have. And it's there's a lot of social pressure to perform being a boy. And the same for girls. But in this case of like the social pressure to do things that maybe you're not ready to do. So whether it's to watch things on TV that you're not ready to watch things on YouTube that you're not really that interested in and maybe find them a bit uncomfortable, to wear certain clothes, to speak in certain ways and to treat people in certain ways, to perhaps talk to people in a way that you wouldn't do in your household, but in order to fit in with your peer group, you want to use language that maybe that doesn't chime with who you really are. Yeah. This stuff is really, really hard and it gets harder.
Well, and also with that, how much of that is simply growing up? Do you know what I mean? We all fall into like different social groups that maybe don't have the best influence on us, but having our parents say, shouldn't be friends with that person, you don't need to listen to that person, can be a bit of a, go away, Mum. Whereas I want to say it all comes good in the end, but it doesn't, So how do we handle it when those influences are there that we know are negatively impacting? Or if, one of my kids loves another child at the moment who's just simply not nice to him. And I just wish he could see that he's not nice to him.
I agree. That's the hardest thing, isn't it? When you're like, please just don't. Yeah. Just get out of this.
Does he always talk to you like that? Because that's not that kind.
Yeah. I think it is like that. So being curious with our kids is the number one thing. Why do you like that? Like, what is it that you do? And my son really wants to watch YouTube. It has enormous cachet for him to watch things on YouTube. And we have quite strict rules about that. Like you're only because you don't know what's going to come up next, right? So you're only allowed to watch it if you're in the same room and we can see what it is. But he feels like, I want to be like this. I want to have this feeling, this cachet, this fitting in with the group. And so I feel like there's a bit where we have to sort of manage. I said to him last night, basically, what is it that you like about this? And don't say it in a way that makes them feel like, shut up.
Yeah.
What is it that you like about this? I'm genuinely interested. I want to know, what is it that you like about watching somebody else watch a video? I just find it so weird.
Well, we watch Gogglebox.
Yeah, exactly, which is very enjoyable. But he's watching someone, they're narrating their thing. It's exactly the same thing. What is it you like about this? Tell me about it. Tell me about the thing that's happening in your world, in your culture, right? You like you say, you're growing up, you're going to find your own social group. The thing that I think is really protective for them is that they do carry our voices with them. So if you're watching telly together, even when they're tiny, teeny, weeny, weeny, you can do this. You can say, like, you can point it out. Oh, I notice in this that there is only one girl character out of 5.
Said everyone about Paw Patrol.
Yeah. It's a surprise, isn't it?
That's interesting. Why is there only Sky?
Yeah.
We'll give you Everest.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, exactly. But it's like, if you mention it, they notice it.
Yeah.
And if they know you care about it, if you say, I think it's not very fair that this was my least favourite thing, was in the Octonauts, which is a programme I really enjoy, but the boys go out and do all the adventuring, and the girls stay behind and fix it from back in the in the octopod. I always feel like, hang on a minute, let the girls out to do the adventuring, please.
Yes. So
if you mention it, it does annoy your children, but they hear it.
Yeah.
They do say, but my daughter has said to me more than once, we can just enjoy this without you telling me what's wrong with it. But she's hearing me say it.
Yeah.
She is hearing me say it. They are both hearing me say, I care about this. I care that women are allowed to be the adventurers.
And to also question it, just to kind of have that out there.
Yeah.
I don't think we knew about gender stereotypes when we were younger in the slightest, and that we were just being.
Yeah.
And I think actually questioning is a good thing.
Yes. So, and then basically there is research that shows when they then come across, because this does happen, kids are exposed to things much earlier than they were even 10 years ago. They've got access to devices. If they've got older siblings, their siblings have got access to things that maybe aren't appropriate. Like Andrew Tate, kids as young as 7 or 8 in the playground are talking about him. They don't necessarily know what it means, but he's part of the social currency. And I think there is a lot of online content by a lot of creators who are targeting young men and boys and sowing misogyny and the idea that women aren't full humans or worth that. But if you have done that, if you have pointed it out to them, when your son comes across that, he'll think, I don't think I agree. I don't think my parents agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't think that's our family worldview. And Laura Bates, who set up the Everyday Sexism Project, she's so amazing, but she found in her research that if boys who had heard that from their parents, that they knew that their parents did not agree with this, that they explicitly have said, it matters to me. Women are worth as much as men. We are equal. We are deserving of the equal things. Parents who'd said that to their children, their sons were actually protected. They actually were. It was like your words are armour for them, for them to think this. Okay, that doesn't fit with my worldview.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, another one of our questions actually is, my son is 8 and I'm already worried about when he starts to get internet access, protecting him from the awful toxic masculinity online. Is this something we should start talking about openly as a family? I wouldn't want him to be secretive or internalise anything negative that he might see online.
The pressure on boys is different to the pressure on girls. There is a body image thing, this idea that you've got to be now bulked up.
Yeah.
You've got to drink all the protein shakes and have bulging muscles. And genetically, some of us aren't going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
In the same way that the expectation for women and for girls looks like it's coming back round, to having to be extremely thin. Like, It's so bad for our children. It's so bad for our children. But I think, yes, you can have these conversations early and in age-appropriate ways. So early on, thinking about valuing all bodies, like thinking about how we positively talk about or neutrally talk about our bodies, actually.
Yeah.
So making sure that we're not focusing on how they look all the time, but thinking about
What they do?
what they do. Yeah. How great it is that we can go out and ride our bikes.
Yeah.
Or, you know, how amazing it is that we don't even have to think about how we digest our food or how our heart beats. Like thinking of our bodies as like amazing things rather than things that we have to sculpt and mould.
It seems like there's a lot of competitive talk with boys. Like I feel like I've seen that a lot, especially when they were younger. You know, who's the fastest? Who's got a six-pack already? You know, who's got this? Or who's got the best this? There's a lot of that chat from a young age. And I don't know where it comes from.
Well, I think that is really true. I think it comes from our expectations. So they did some research. The National Education Union did some research where they looked at school readiness and they looked at the things that we as parents are more likely to, like, what do you do with your kid before they get to school?
Yeah.
And they found that parents were more likely to do singing, reading, painting, drawing, concentrated activities with daughters than they were with sons. And the one thing they were more likely to do with their sons and their daughters was sport. And sport in a competitive way, which is great. Like I don't want to say that I'm down on competition because there's so much healthy, so much good about sport and competitive sport. Like there's so much good that comes out of that. But if you're only getting to do the competitive bit, that becomes a thing. They then also, there's been other research that shows when you ask, the expectations that we have on boys and girls are different. So we have higher expectations on this sort of communal social behaviour for girls than we do for boys.
Yeah.
So we are less likely to punish boys for what we might call antisocial behaviour and less likely to praise them for pro-social behaviour. And then that plays out in the classroom. So then in the classroom you'll find that boys, if you put in a group of boys and you ask them to do group work together, it plays out that they're all in competition with each other.
Yeah.
The expectations haven't necessarily been set that they should learn to collaborate and they should work together, and then they have worse outcomes. Whereas a group of girls are often have been taught how to negotiate, basically. And often people are like, well, that's because girls and boys are different. And I would say that's because we treat girls and boys differently.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because you do have to look at the individual child. Like one of mine just bounces all the time. I could never get the first two to sit down and colour. Like I was always really envious when we went to anyone's houses and they were sat down, their girls were sat down colouring. I was always envious. Whereas my third boy loves to sit down and colour, loves to do arts and crafts, loves to play with, like, you know, role play with smaller toys, animals. So it's really fascinating. Like I don't feel like I've treated them differently in any way. Whereas, especially the middle one, he needs to get out. He needs to be out and be physical. Is that down to the individual rather than being male or female?
I think so, yes. So my daughter is like your middle one.
Yeah.
We have to go out. In lockdown, we learnt pretty early on.
Out by 9 o'clock.
Yeah, we have to get that run in.
Yeah.
It's like having a puppy.
Yeah.
We have to go and burn a bit off. Otherwise, it's all boiling up inside. Whereas actually my youngest, he can sit down and colour. What it is hard to unpick.
Yeah.
What nature or nurture.
Yeah.
But I think if we could truly just treat them as who they are, rather than who we expect them to be, we would see much more variation.
Yeah, absolutely. The final question from the community is, what are some ways to encourage more shy children to express their emotions if they're having a hard time opening up?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know how old their child is.
No, they haven't specified.
But for example, if you're driving in the car or you're going for a walk, when you're not looking at the person,
So much easier.
So much easier to have these conversations. So rather than trying to sit down with them like in their room or at the kitchen table or on the sofa, go out and do something. Go for a walk, go out for a drive, on the way somewhere, introduce a conversation. Perhaps you're just chit-chatting about stuff, and then maybe just offer a moment, offer an opportunity where they can say, perhaps you'll say, how are things going at school? If you've got a feeling, it sounds maybe like this person's got a bit of a feeling that there's something that their child wants to tell them. Is there something you want to talk about? Just give them an opportunity and keep on doing it. And don't worry if you're rebuffed the first time, because it's hard, and often they don't want to do it the first time, but if they know you're there and you're listening.
I had years of one of my kids just grunting at me whenever it was a feeling question. I even bought books that were about feelings. And as soon as the word feelings was there, it would be an instant grunt and shrug. And it's taken a lot of leaning in and kind of taking that pressure off for him to start talking and sharing. We're not there, not by any means. And if he's not in the right headspace to share, then he simply won't. It will go back to grunting. But it does feel like now, actually, especially at night time. And I know that we all know that kids love to have those little things, that come into play just before bed so they stay up longer. But I think I've realised that when our children are ready to have those conversations, it's really important that we down tools and listen.
Yeah, I agree. And bedtime is that time often, isn't it? They get into bed and they think, oh, actually. The thing about the books, though, that's a great idea. There are loads of great books.
Yeah.
And there is one that's just called Feelings, which is just that little boy standing on a hill, and you turn the pages and just all the different feelings. And to encourage your kids to know that all feelings are real.
Yeah.
Like that, you can feel all of these feelings and they come and go. They're like weather. They change. Yeah. It changes all the time. We're always feeling something. And you don't always feel happy. I think that is crucial, actually.
Yeah.
You can't always feel happy.
Yeah, absolutely. We end the podcast with you completing 3 sentences. So the first one is, if I could tell you one thing, it would be...
Don't worry. You're doing a great job. And even though there's a lot of pressure on us as parents at the moment to feel like we get everything right, you can't always get everything right. And it's okay, you can always say sorry.
I love that. Since having children, I
care less about what people think about me.
And it's so freeing.
And I love it. I do genuinely feel like, I remember my mum being like this as well, that she would do things in the street and I would cringe. Like she'd hear a song that she loved and she'd sing along, or she would dance to something. And I feel like having small children has allowed me to access stuff that I wouldn't have done, like to stand with my kids in the front room and dance to some cheesy songs on the radio, which maybe I would have thought was a bit embarrassing. And I'm just not embarrassed by anything. I mean, once I've breastfed a child on the tube, I'm not embarrassed about anything anymore. It's allowed me to be me. Yeah. And I love that.
Yeah. And finally, I'm happy when?
I'm happy when I feel like I'm making a difference. And whether that is making a difference to my kids or making a difference out in the world, and that's why I do what I do. I am happy. I feel really fulfilled and contented when I feel like what I'm doing will make a difference in the world. And the world doesn't need to be massive. Yeah. But in my little world, the thing I'm doing is changing. Like it's going to be better. Something is going to change, and it's going to be better for me, for them, for my community, for however that goes.
And that's really important, isn't it? Because I think so many of us can go, well, there's no point doing anything because it's never going to change. That's just the way it is. But actually, if you can change your community, the ripple effect of that, where the people in your community go and move somewhere else, or, it all ripples out. And I think these conversations are so important to keep having, whatever you feel passionate about, because the more you talk about it, the more further afield that message gets.
Totally agree.
Thank you so much. I've loved this chat.
Me too. It's been so fun. So wide-ranging.
I know. I think we've covered lots. There was so much to talk about. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great. Thank you.